Maybe next year you'll be good enough, Mom said coldly after forgetting my son's Christmas gift. I cut them off. Weeks later, they stood on the porch, sobbed. I never thought I'd be completely cutting my family out of my life. But sometimes people show you who they really are, and you have to believe them. For me, that moment of clarity came during what should have been a joyful Christmas morning, when my 6-year-old son Curtis learned a painful lesson about where he stood in his grandparents' eyes. Growing up as the eldest son in the Martinez family, I'd always been the responsible one. My younger brother Troy was the golden child, charismatic, outgoing, and perpetually in need of rescuing. While my parents funded Troy's education at a prestigious private university, I worked night shifts to put myself through community college. I spent years telling myself that was just how families worked. The dynamics are never perfectly fair. Even when my wife Melissa pointed out the disparity in how my parents treated us versus how they treated Troy, I brushed it off. They're from a different generation, I'd say. They show love in their own way. When Curtis was born, I genuinely believed things might change. Surely my parents would see this innocent child as deserving of the same love and attention they lavished on Troy's kids. Melissa was skeptical, but I insisted on giving them the chance to be better grandparents than they had been parents. They're going to hurt Curtis eventually, Melissa warned me one night after my parents had forgotten Curtis's birthday yet remembered to send elaborate gifts to Troy's children the following week. It's only a matter of time. I didn't want to believe her. Family was family, and I wanted Curtis to have what I never did, grandparents who valued him. The annual Martinez family Christmas gathering was held at my parents' sprawling suburban home. They'd gone all out with decorations, a 12-foot tree adorned with ornaments collected over decades, garlands draped across the banister, and lights twinkling from every possible surface. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, and Christmas music played softly in the background. Curtis was vibrating with excitement as we arrived. At 6, he was fully immersed in the magic of Christmas, and he'd been counting down the days. He bounded into the house, giving quick hugs to his grandparents before joining his cousins near the massive pile of gifts under the tree. The gift-opening ceremony had always been a production in my family. My mother insisted everyone watch as each person opened their presents to properly appreciate the thought that went into each selection. We gathered in the living room, the adults with coffee or mimosas, the children fidgeting with anticipation. My father started the distribution, calling out names and handing over beautifully wrapped packages. Troy's oldest received the latest gaming console, his middle child a tablet, and his youngest a handcrafted dollhouse that must have cost a small fortune. Troy himself was given a sleek new laptop for your business ventures, my father said proudly, and his wife received a designer watch. Melissa and I were handed department store gift cards, $50 each, the plastic cards tucked into generic Christmas cards with no personal message. I felt the familiar sting but smiled politely. This was nothing new. Then came the moment that would permanently alter our family. My father looked at his list, called out every remaining name, and sat back down. Curtis, sitting cross-legged on the floor with an empty lap, looked confused. He glanced around at his cousins, who were busy examining their bounty. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Curtis, in his small, innocent voice, asked the question that broke my heart. "Grandma, did Santa forget my present at your house?" My mother's response came without hesitation, her voice cool and dismissive. "Gifts are for those who earn them, Curtis. Maybe next year you'll be good enough." The room fell silent. Even Troy looked uncomfortable, quickly busying himself with adjusting the settings on his new laptop. Curtis's eyes widened, his lower lip beginning to tremble as he processed his grandmother's words. "But I was good," he whispered, tears pooling in his eyes. "I did all my chores and helped Mom with the dishes and—" "That's enough, Curtis," my mother interrupted. "Don't make a scene. Why don't you go play with your cousin's toys? I'm sure they'll share." Something inside me, something that had been bending for 35 years, finally snapped. I crossed the room in 3 strides, scooping Curtis into my arms. He buried his face in my neck, his small body shaking with silent sobs. "How could you do this to a 6-year-old child?" My voice was low, controlled, but vibrating with fury. "What kind of person deliberately hurts a child on Christmas?" My father waved his hand dismissively. "Don't make such a big deal out of nothing, Michael. Curtis needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around him. Not everyone gets a trophy just for showing up." "He's 6 years old," I replied, my arms tightening protectively around Curtis. He's a child who believed his grandparents loved him. Melissa was already gathering our coats, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. She'd been right all along, and I'd been a fool to expose Curtis to this toxic environment. This isn't something you can take back, I said, looking my parents in the eyes. We're done. Do not contact us again. The drive home was quiet except for Curtis's occasional sniffles. In the rearview mirror, I could see him staring out the window, his Christmas joy thoroughly extinguished. Did I do something bad, Dad? He asked finally, his voice small and uncertain. No, buddy, I replied, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. You did nothing wrong, Grandma and Grandpa. They have problems that have nothing to do with you. They don't know how to be good grandparents. But why don't they like me? The simple question nearly undid me. Melissa reached back and took Curtis's hand. Sometimes people are so caught up in their own problems that they can't see how wonderful others are, she explained gently. It's their loss, because you are the most amazing boy in the world. The text started before we even reached home. My mother, you're overreacting as usual. My father, your behavior was embarrassing and childish. Troy, dude, just calm down and call them. You know how Mom is. I blocked their numbers, then wrote a brief email outlining our position. No contact until they acknowledged what they had done and offered a sincere apology to Curtis. They responded with excuses, deflections, and accusations. They conveniently forgot to address the central issue, their deliberate cruelty toward Curtis. We created new holiday traditions in the following days. Melissa's family stepped up, showering Curtis with love and reassurance. Friends invited us to their celebrations. We volunteered at a local shelter on New Year's Day, helping Curtis understand that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about who shows up for you when it matters. Just over a week into the new year, the doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. Curtis was at a friend's birthday party, and Melissa was catching up on work in her home office. I peered through the peephole and felt a surge of anger. My parents stood on the porch, looking notably disheveled. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, and my father's normally impeccable appearance was rumpled. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but remained firmly in the doorway, blocking their entry. Michael, thank goodness, my mother began, her voice trembling. We've been trying to reach you. I was clear about my boundaries, I replied coldly. What do you want? My father, looking older than I'd ever seen him, stepped forward. Son, we're in trouble. It's Troy. He's gone. Over the next few minutes, they unveiled a story that would have shocked me if I hadn't spent a lifetime watching them enable Troy's worst behaviors. Apparently, he had systematically emptied their accounts over the past month. Their retirement savings, $280,000, gone. Credit cards maxed out. Even family heirlooms had disappeared, presumably pawned or sold online. Troy had vanished 3 days ago, leaving only a brief note saying he had a business opportunity, abroad that couldn't wait. No apology, no explanation for the theft, just the expectation that Mom and Dad would understand, as they always had. We have nowhere else to go, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. The bank is foreclosing on the house. Our utilities are being shut off tomorrow. We're still your parents, Michael. Family helps family in times of need. I stood frozen in the doorway, a storm of emotions battling within me. Part of me, the dutiful son I'd been programmed to be, felt their pain and wanted to help. But a stronger part remembered Curtis's tears, his confusion, his heartbreak at being deemed not good enough for even a token Christmas gift. Where were you when Curtis needed grandparents? I asked quietly. Where was this family helps family philosophy when you deliberately excluded a 6-year-old from Christmas? This is different, my father insisted, his voice regaining some of its usual authoritative tone. This is an actual crisis, not some childish disappointment over presents. It wasn't about the presents, I said, feeling a calm clarity settle over me. It was about you making a child feel worthless. It was about showing me exactly who you are and what you value. My mother's tears dried up remarkably quickly, replaced by the familiar look of disapproval I'd grown up with. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. The Bible says to honor your parents, Michael. You made your choice at Christmas, I replied, beginning to close the door. Curtis and I are making ours now. You'll regret this when we're gone, my father called as the door shut between us. Blood is thicker than water. I leaned against the closed door, half expecting to feel guilt or uncertainty. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. For the first time in my life, I had placed my son's well-being above my parents' demands. The weight of decades of trying to earn their approval lifted from my shoulders. Unfortunately, their appearance at our door was just the beginning. 2 days later, they showed up at my workplace, creating a scene in the lobby that required security intervention. My boss, thankfully understanding after I explained the situation, implemented a visitor screening policy to prevent future disruptions. The following week brought an even more disturbing escalation. My phone rang during a meeting at Curtis's school. My mother had attempted to remove him from his classroom, claiming a family emergency. Thanks to our prior warning to the administration about potential custody issues, the front office had refused to release Curtis and had called me immediately. I filed a police report for attempted kidnapping that afternoon, my hands shaking with suppressed rage as I detailed the incident to a sympathetic officer. The reality of how far my parents might go to force their way back into our lives had hit home. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about protecting Curtis from people who had proven themselves unsafe. The police visit apparently triggered something in my parents. Unable to reach us directly, they took their grievances public. Social media posts appeared, painting themselves as abandoned elderly parents whose ungrateful son had turned his back on them in their time of need. Strategic omissions and carefully worded sympathy baits soon had distant relatives and old family friends messaging me, questioning how I could be so heartless. I maintained my silence publicly while documenting everything privately. Each harassing phone call from a spoofed number, each manipulative message, each attempt to circumvent our boundaries was carefully recorded and added to the growing file my attorney was building for a potential restraining order. The breaking point came 3 weeks after their initial visit. My mother somehow obtained Melissa's personal cell number and called late one evening. "You've poisoned Michael against his family," she hissed when Melissa answered. "A real wife would encourage reconciliation, not division. A real grandmother wouldn't emotionally abuse her grandchild," Melissa replied calmly before ending the call. Minutes later, my phone rang, an unknown number that I answered on instinct, worried it might be related to work. "You listen to me, Michael," my mother's voice cut through before I could even say hello. "I am still your mother, and I demand the respect I deserve. If you don't start behaving like a proper son, I'll make sure Curtis knows exactly what kind of man his father really is." Something in her threat, the willingness to hurt Curtis again to get what she wanted, crystallized my resolve. I activated the call recording feature with a swipe. "You lost the right to call yourself a grandparent when you decided to hurt a 6-year-old, I said, my voice steady. "You lost the right to call yourself my mother when you attempted to abduct my son from his school. This is your final warning. Contact us again in any way, and I will pursue every legal option available to keep you away from my family." "You're ungrateful." I ended the call and blocked the number, then sat heavily on the edge of our bed. Melissa wrapped her arms around me without a word, her presence a silent confirmation that I had done the right thing. The next morning, after careful consideration and consultation with our attorney, I took action. I created a private social media post visible only to family members and those who had been contacting us about the situation. In it, I included the recording of my mother's threat, a redacted copy of the police report from the school incident, and a calm, factual account of the Christmas event that had started it all. "I'm sharing this not to escalate a family dispute, but to explain why we've made the difficult decision to cut contact," I wrote. "I would have preferred to handle this privately, but the ongoing harassment and public manipulation have made that impossible. My priority is protecting my son from further harm." The response was immediate and overwhelming. My mother's sister called to apologize, admitting she'd witnessed similar behavior over the years but had never had the courage to confront it. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with messages of support. Even my father's brother, who had always been firmly in the family above all camp, sent a brief message. "You did right by your boy. That's what matters." Most significantly, Melissa's brother Sean, who had remained neutral during the conflict, posted a public statement defending our decision. "Having witnessed the impact of this situation on my nephew firsthand, I fully support Michael and Melissa's actions to protect their son. Family should build you up, not tear you down." The public exposure achieved what private boundaries could not. The harassment stopped almost overnight. Through family grapevines, we heard my parents had moved in with a second cousin in another state. They made no attempt to apologize or acknowledge their actions. 6 months later, our family had found a new equilibrium. Curtis, with the help of a wonderful child therapist, had processed his feelings about his grandparents. "They're not very good at loving people," he explained to me one day with the simple wisdom of children. "It's sad for them because loving people is the best thing." We created new traditions to replace the old ones. We celebrated chosen family, friends who showed up consistently, who treated Curtis with the love and respect every child deserves. We learned together that boundaries aren't walls designed to punish, they're shields meant to protect. On Curtis's 7th birthday, surrounded by people who genuinely delighted in his joy, I watched him blow out his candles with a smile that reached his eyes. Melissa squeezed my hand, and I felt a profound certainty settle in my chest. This circle of authentic love and mutual respect was what family should feel like. Sometimes the hardest choices are also the clearest ones. Sometimes protecting those who depend on you means disappointing those who raised you. And sometimes, the family you choose creates a stronger foundation than the one you were born into. I don't know if I'll ever hear from my parents again. Part of me hopes they've found the capacity for genuine reflection and change. But a larger part of me has made peace with the reality that some relationships cannot and should not be salvaged, not when the cost is a child's sense of self-worth. Curtis deserves better. And now he knows that I'll always stand between him and anyone who suggests otherwise, even if that person shares our blood. In the end, that's what parenting is, a promise to protect, even when it's difficult, even when it hurts, even when it means walking away from your past to secure your child's future.
My dad tried to force me out of my own house for my pregnant stepsister. This time, I stood up to him. I'm a 34-year-old guy dealing with some serious family drama. My self-centered, mostly absent dad, 62, recently found out how much I'm making at my new job, and suddenly he's trying to kick me out of my own house, all in the name of family. Here's the deal. My stepsister, Karen, 29, got herself pregnant, and between her questionable career choices as an escort and OnlyFans model, she's having trouble finding a place to live. Now my dad thinks he's found the perfect solution. Yes, it's me. He wants me to give up my house and my hard-earned money to help my stepsister, all because she's made some questionable life choices. The irony. This is the same dad who wanted nothing to do with me growing up. But now that he's discovered I've got a nice house and a good income, he's suddenly all about how we're blood and family. My dad openly rejected any responsibility for me multiple times when I was growing up. But now he's not only trying to remind me that he's my father, he's also pushing me to strengthen my bonds with his wife and her daughter. Sure, Karen is technically my half-sister, but I was shipped off to boarding school so early that we never really formed any kind of connection. Looking back, I'm kind of glad we didn't, because what I've learned about her lately has been pretty disappointing. I want to be clear. I'm just venting here. These are my thoughts and feelings, and you might not agree with them. But I need to get this off my chest. I don't really have anyone else to talk to about this. Karen is my half-sister. She's doing things that make my dad proud, though I'm pretty sure he doesn't know the whole story. She works as an escort and has an unsuccessful OnlyFans account. Dad calls her his pride and joy, completely oblivious to what she actually does for a living. I'm not super conservative, but I do have my principles, and I'm focused on my career. I date when I have time, trying to get to know women properly. Sometimes there's a connection, but things don't work out because of distance or schedules. Other times, there's just no chemistry. I prefer not to have casual hookups. I'm waiting for the right person. Having a high body count isn't something I'm interested in. That's just my personal choice. My stepsister sees things differently. She's lost count of her partners, and while I try not to judge, I worry about her safety as an escort. Some clients can be dangerous. Plus, she posts explicit content online, though it doesn't seem to bring in much money. I found out about this from a friend who she'd propositioned after they went for drinks. He showed me her page after telling me she'd sent him the link. He claims he didn't know she was my sister when they went out. I'm not sure if I believe him, but whatever. She's constantly broke and hitting up Dad for money, so I assume her online ventures aren't very successful. I've seen her getting into cars with older men and sneaking back into the house at odd hours. I noticed this during my college breaks, though I'm not sure if she's still doing it. Either way, I want nothing to do with it. I have a respectable job that I've worked hard for, even though I haven't lived much with my new family. Since Dad was always eager to send me away, I've seen enough of Karen to know she takes after her mother, Susan, 58. Susan seems to think she was some kind of celebrity in her prime. She used to be a flight attendant and was attractive enough to catch the eye of guys like my dad. Now she's your typical Botoxed Karen with claws for nails who runs a neighborhood daycare. How parents trust their kids with those talons is beyond me. Susan's got an opinion about everything and loves stirring up drama in other people's lives. Her voice is like nails on a chalkboard, and she's got more plastic in her than a Tupperware factory. She's about as genuine as a $3 bill. She's always had my dad wrapped around her finger, and I'm pretty sure she's the main reason he shipped me off to boarding school when I was 8. She didn't want to deal with raising someone else's kid. Now about my dad, he's really the root of all this drama. He's got this attitude that everything he does is justified because he's lived a whole life, so he supposedly knows better. He's told me straight up that he regrets having me because I'm nothing like him. Honestly, thank God for that. My mom was different. She was strong and knew what mattered in life. She took good care of my dad until things fell apart. Even then, she always told me that Dad wasn't a bad person, just different. She'd say that no matter what happened, he'd always be my dad, and I shouldn't forget that. She was too good of a person to poison my mind against him, but I'm sure he was just as unbearable to her as he is now. They separated and got divorced when I was 4. 2 months later, Dad married Susan. They had Karen when I was 5, and then my mom died in a car crash. She was coming to pick me up from school. She was always on time, except for that one day. She was just 10 minutes late, but to a kid waiting, it felt like hours. Some drunk driver hit her at an intersection. He survived. She didn't. I waited at school for 2 hours before anyone came to get me. When Dad finally showed up, I remember him looking at Susan with this annoyed expression, asking what they should do with me. Her response? Your kid, your problem. Well, right back at you, Dad. Now you can't just show up and expect me to take care of your spoiled kid. I've worked my butt off since I was 15. After boarding school, I went to college, only coming home for holidays. So basically, I've been on my own since I was 8. I've put in serious effort to get where I am, and I recently bought my first house. It's nothing fancy, but it's way better than the apartment I was sharing with friends. Even though I'm not exactly close with my family, I figured I should include them in this milestone moment. So I invited them to my housewarming party. Man, you should have seen my dad's face. He looked straight up jealous, asking all these pointed questions about the furniture, the architect, and the interior designer. Every answer I gave was met with some snarky comment, like I wouldn't know. You never bothered telling me. He kept trying to make our rocky relationship obvious in front of everyone, even my boss. A week later, Dad called me saying he needed to meet urgently. I was swamped at work with this complex project, but I agreed anyway. When I got home, I found Susan and Karen in the living room. Susan looked angry as usual, and Karen, with red, puffy eyes, gave me the side eye. Dad was in the kitchen pulling beers from the fridge. He offered me one, which I politely turned down, wondering what bomb he was about to drop. When I asked what this was about, he got all high and mighty, asking if I'd finally started giving a damn about us. Then he insisted we all move to the living room for some kind of family meeting. I sat across from them, feeling like I was about to face a firing squad. Dad put his beer down and hit me with this gem. Are you blind? When I didn't respond, he went on about how I must either be blind or choose not to see what's happening around me. According to him, I'd gotten too proud with my new house and was ignoring the people who actually mean something. Finally, after all this buildup, they dropped the bomb. Karen was pregnant. I started to congratulate her, but before I could get the words out, she burst into tears. Susan hugged her while Dad explained that the father had bailed as soon as he found out about the baby. Karen wanted to keep it, and apparently, that's where I came in. My first question was whether she could afford it, which earned me death glares from both Karen and Susan. I honestly meant well. I was already thinking maybe they needed help with money, which I was willing to consider. But then Dad moved to sit next to me. And that's when things went off the rails. He started this whole speech about being a good father to his girl, and how my mother must not have taught me how to be a good brother, but that brothers should give their lives for their sister's comfort. I almost laughed out loud. Sure, I could help financially, but die for her? Come on. When I asked what exactly they wanted from me, Dad smiled and patted my back like I was finally getting it. But what came next was absolutely insane. You're giving your house to Karen. No, I'm not, I said immediately. Dad frowned. Why not? I told him I could help with some money, maybe even let her stay in a room rent-free until she got back on her feet. But Dad jumped up, shouting that this wasn't enough. He wanted me to not only give her the entire house, but also move out and buy another place for myself. Oh, and by the way, I'd still be responsible for all the bills and maintenance since Karen couldn't afford them while pregnant and unemployed. Hell no. I tried to stay respectful, but I'd had enough. I got up and told them this wasn't happening, then left. I learned that healthy relationships require boundaries, honesty, and mutual respect. Success earned through hard work should be protected, and we shouldn't let guilt or manipulation force us into decisions that compromise our values or well-being.
I dedicated my life to our family business, but when my father retired, he handed everything to my unqualified sister instead. I'm 35 male, and for over a decade my entire life revolved around the family business, the kind of business you're expected to grow up into. I sacrificed a lot, late nights, weekends, relationships, just to keep the gears turning, to make sure what my father had built didn't fall apart. In my head, it was all worth it. I was the son, the heir, the one who was supposed to take the reins when my father eventually retired. At least, that's what I thought. My father always talked about legacy, about how important it was to keep the family name strong in the industry. I bought into it. All those years, I never asked for more than what I earned. I worked for every cent, every bit of respect, and the idea that one day the company would be mine kept me going. But that day never came. It was last summer when my father officially stepped down. I remember walking into the office, expecting some kind of announcement, a transfer of control maybe. Instead, my sister, S, sat in his chair, all smiles, leaning back like she belonged there. I couldn't believe it. She hadn't worked a day in her life. Hell, she barely showed up to family dinners. She'd always been more interested in the superficial, spending money, living off the family's success without putting in the effort. But there she was, in the big office, holding the keys to the entire company. The new CEO. I looked at my father, waiting for some kind of explanation, but he just shrugged and said, S has a vision for where the company can go. I think she's better suited to lead. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Better suited? How could he say that with a straight face? It didn't make any sense. She didn't know the business. She didn't know anything. I tried to stay calm. I asked him, quietly at first, why? Why her? He looked at me, eyes blank, and said, it's a new era. The company needs fresh ideas, new blood. I'll never forget the way S smirked, as if she had won some silent game I didn't know we were playing. Fresh ideas? I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. She doesn't even know how the company runs. She cut in before my father could answer. You've been keeping things afloat? Sure, but we need to grow. I've got connections, plans. You've done your part, but now it's time to think bigger. The entitlement in her voice was unreal. She was talking like I was some placeholder, like the years I'd poured into this company meant nothing. I lost it. All those years I worked, all the sacrifices I made. For what? To hand everything over to her because she's thinking bigger? What about the fact that I actually know how this company works? My father didn't budge. His decision was made. I could see it in his eyes, the same eyes that once told me I was the future. Now I was just in the way. For weeks, I stayed on. I thought I could ride it out, keep doing what I always did. maybe find a way to fix things. But S made it impossible. She started pulling rank, undermining every decision I made. She'd show up late, make changes without consulting anyone, and then when things went wrong, she'd blame me. Every single time. And my father? He did nothing. Absolutely nothing. He just let it happen, like he didn't even care anymore. Or worse, like he was relieved I wasn't fighting it. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked out. I figured if my father was so convinced S was the future, he could deal with the fallout when she ran the company into the ground. I wasn't going to stick around and watch her destroy what I had helped build. But then, a few months ago, my father had a heart attack. It wasn't a mild one, either. It was bad. The kind that leaves you laid up in a hospital bed with wires and machines doing half the work for your body. S was nowhere to be found. She didn't even visit. The same daughter he handed everything to, the one he thought could lead the company into some new era, had completely abandoned him. She didn't want to deal with the hospital, the bills, the stress. She didn't want to deal with him. I got the call from my mother. She was frantic, sobbing, "Your father, he needs you." I hadn't spoken to him in months. After everything, I tried to distance myself, to build my own life away from the wreckage of what should have been mine. But hearing my mother's voice, hearing the desperation, I felt something stir inside me. Anger? Guilt? I don't know. Maybe both. I drove to the hospital, and when I walked into that room, I saw him there, frail, hooked up to all those machines, eyes barely open. It was like seeing a ghost. The man who once seemed larger than life, the man who made all the decisions, now couldn't even stand on his own. He looked at me, eyes watery, and whispered, "Where's S?" I clenched my fists. Of course, she was the first person he asked about. Of course, even now, he was wondering where his precious daughter was. "She's not coming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She hasn't been around, and I don't think she plans to." He stared at me, confused, like he couldn't process it. I could see the pain in his eyes. Whether it was physical pain or the realization that S didn't care, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. "I gave her everything," he muttered, almost to himself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him that he didn't just give her everything. He took everything from me to give to her. But looking at him, lying there, weak and broken, I couldn't do it. Not like this. "I know," I said, my voice tight. "I know you did." The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits and tense conversations. My mother was barely holding it together, and S remained MIA. The company, unsurprisingly, was in chaos. The company, unsurprisingly, was in chaos. Turns out S's big ideas weren't so great after all. Profits were down, employees were quitting, and contracts were falling through. Everything I had warned about was happening, but I wasn't in a position to care anymore. I had my own decisions to make. One night, after another long day at the hospital, my father finally broke. He looked at me with those tired, regret-filled eyes and said, "I made a mistake, didn't I?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him, the weight of the past year pressing down on me. "Yeah," I finally said. "You did." He nodded, a slow, painful nod. "Can you fix it? Can you help?" I couldn't believe he was asking me that. After everything, after handing my entire future to someone who couldn't care less, he was asking me to clean up the mess. I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk out of that hospital room and never look back. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the years of loyalty, the years of believing in the idea of family, or maybe it was just pity. Whatever it was, I couldn't leave him like that. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can fix it." Silence hung in the air between us, heavy and thick. He didn't push any further. Maybe he knew he didn't have the right to. Eventually, the hospital released him. He was weak, still recovering, but he was home. And so was I, at least for now. I stepped in, cleaned up some of the immediate disasters at the company. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but things started to stabilize. Estelle hadn't shown her face. One day, she did call. Well, not call me directly. She called our mother, probably expecting the usual guilt-free handout. But this time, our mother didn't cave. I don't know exactly what was said, but I do know that S didn't get what she wanted. Maybe that's when she realized that her new era wasn't going to happen without the hard work she'd never wanted to do. And then, just like that, she was out of the picture. No visits, no calls, no apologies. It's like she vanished as soon as things got tough. My father never admitted it outright, but I could see the realization weighing on him. He'd given her everything, and she gave him nothing in return. But by then, I was already dealing with my own internal battle. I could take control again, run the company the way I always had, rebuild what had been destroyed, or I could walk away for good, leave the mess behind, and start fresh. The company, my father, all of it. It had taken so much from me already. I wasn't sure how much more I had to give. In the end, I chose a middle ground. I stabilized the company, made sure it wouldn't implode, then handed it over to someone I trusted. Someone who wasn't family. Someone who had earned their place. And then I walked away, for good this time. As for my father, well, he's still here, recovering slowly. I visit, I help when I can, but our relationship will never be the same. How could it be? Trust was broken, maybe beyond repair. He tried to apologize a few times, but the words always felt hollow. Too much damage had been done. We keep things civil, but that's all it is. Civility. I'll never be able to forget what he did. How easily he gave everything away to someone who didn't deserve it. How he overlooked me until it was too late. She never came back. She moved out of state, from what I hear. Living her life, disconnected from the fallout she caused. I doubt she thinks much about us, about the mess she left behind. Typical, really. And honestly, that's fine with me. The less I have to deal with her, the better. It's strange, but I've found a kind of peace in walking away. I've started a new business, something completely different. And it's small, but it's mine. No family ties, no expectations. Just me building something from the ground up again. This time, though, I'm doing it for myself. Looking back, I realize I spent years chasing validation from a father who never really saw me. Now, I don't need that anymore. I've learned that sometimes, walking away is the best thing you can do. For your sanity, for your future. So that's where I'm at. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but in a way, it's better. I'm free. Free from the weight of family expectations. Free from a business that consumed me. And free from people who never appreciated what I gave. And to anyone reading this, remember, sometimes the best thing you can do is let go, even when it hurts. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.